I wasn't offered a chair. They deliberately ran out, leaving me on the floor. My grandfather tapped his cane, placing a yellow deed on the table. "Get up," he ordered, his voice quiet. "The house belongs to her." As the room rang with silence, my sister's face went pale. I watched her boyfriend's meticulous plan begin to unravel right in my hands. "My name is Tessa Monroe. I am 32 years old, and I am a reserve investigator at the Red Cliffs Training Center. It's a job that demands precision, an eye for data points that do not align, and an understanding of human behavior under pressure. But my training means nothing here, in my grandmother's house, where the air is thick with the smell of lemon oil and fresh grief. I am on leave, summoned back to Raven Ridge, Colorado, for what my older sister, Haley, called estate sorting. It sounded organized, clean, and necessary. It was none of those things. The reality was this: a cramped study, 4 chairs, and 5 people. My grandfather, Arthur Monroe, sat in my grandmother's high-backed armchair, his ancient leather briefcase at his feet. His presence dominated the room, quiet and heavy as the mountain altitude. My mother, Evelyn, perched nervously on a small velvet stool, her hands twisting a tissue. And then there were Haley and Graham. Haley, my sister, all polished efficiency and brittle smiles, sat in the leather desk chair. Her partner, Graham North, occupied the matching guest chair. He was her financial advisor, a man who looked like he was assembled from a catalog specializing in aspirational wealth. His suit was too sharp, his cologne too aggressive, his empathy too practiced. They had started without me. I stood in the doorway, my jacket still damp from the sleet outside. "Tessa, you made it," Haley said, the brightness in her voice not reaching her eyes. She gestured vaguely. "We're just getting organized." "Where should I sit?" Haley gave a small, theatrical laugh. "Oh my God, I completely lost track. Graham, did we bring in the chair from the dining room?" Graham, already sorting a stack of thick cream-colored folders, shook his head without looking up. "Slipped my mind, darling. We were so focused on getting the sensitive documents ready for your mother." A lie, a clean, simple, obvious lie. The dust on the carpet showed exactly where the 4 chairs had been placed, and they had been there for hours. This was intentional. This was a message. "Tess, just grab a spot on the floor for 1 second, will you?" Haley pleaded, her voice dripping with the false urgency of a stressed hostess. "Just while we get organized, I'll find another one. Promise. I am an officer. I have sat in the mud of a training field and the pristine offices of superiors. But sitting on the floor of my grandmother's study, while my sister's boyfriend ran a hostile meeting from a chair I should have occupied, was a specific kind of humiliation. I slid down the wall, my jeans rubbing against the stiff Berber carpet. I felt like a child relegated to the kids' table. I looked at my grandfather. He was watching, his gaze moving from Haley to Graham, then to me. He saw it. He saw everything. He lifted his heavy oak cane an inch off the floor, then set it down. Tap. A quiet, steady beat against the hardwood. Graham cleared his throat. "All right, Evelyn, Tessa, thank you for making this time. As you know, with your mother's passing, we have a significant number of assets that need to be streamlined. What Haley and I want to do is ensure Evelyn's peace of mind." He slid the folders across the coffee table. The paper was heavy, expensive. I picked mine up. On the cover, embossed in a tasteful navy blue, was a logo, Blue Ridge Fiduciary. My focus sharpened. It wasn't recognition. It was pattern alignment. I'd seen this logo, not in a financial paper, but in the digital sludge of my mother's junk mail folder. I had been home 3 months prior, helping her reset a forgotten password. Her inbox was flooded. This same logo was attached to predatory spam. "Secure your military widow benefits. Don't let the government keep your legacy." I looked at Graham, his face sincere, his tie perfectly dimpled. He was selling my mother the same service he sold to desperate widows in spam emails. Haley leaned forward, placing her hand on Mom's knee. She was translating the jargon, softening the edges. Mom, it just means Graham helps organize. With Grandma gone, we need to protect you. We need to make sure everything is in one place. But your grandmother's will was very clear, Mom whispered, twisting the tissue. Everything was supposed to be simple. It is, Mom. This just makes it simpler, Haley said. Graham slid a single sheet of paper from the top of the stack, along with a heavy, expensive-looking pen. This, Evelyn, is the most important item for today. It's a standard temporary proxy. Given the complexity of the estate, it simply allows Haley to manage the asset accounts and the medical directives. My mother looked at the paper, her eyes unfocused. But shouldn't Tessa and shouldn't we both? Haley cut her off, the surgical precision of her timing honed by years of practice. Mom, Tessa's busy. Her voice was full of manufactured sympathy, but the words were aimed directly at me. She's always on base, or deploying, or in training. We can't wait 3 weeks for her security clearance to clear every time you need a prescription refilled or a utility bill paid. This isn't about cutting her out. It's just easier for everyone. The accusation landed, heavy and familiar, always away. The guilt they had weaponized for a decade. The reason I was unreliable. The reason I was unworthy of a chair. My pulse quickened. The anger hot and immediate. I wanted to stand up and call them out. I wanted to point out the predatory logo, the manipulative timing, the insult of the seating arrangement. But my training took over. Observe, record, do not engage. They wanted a reaction. They wanted the unstable soldier to lose her cool, to prove their point that she was too volatile to be trusted. I kept my face neutral. I looked at Haley, then at Graham. They were a team. My mother was the target. I was the obstacle. I slid my left hand under my jacket, resting it on my knee. My service watch felt cool against my skin. I pressed the bezel 3 times, a sequence I had practiced until it was muscle memory. A single red light blinked on the side, almost invisible against the dark metal, and then went dark. The microphone was active. Priority, evidence, argument later. I just don't know, Mom whispered. She looked at me, sitting on the floor, her eyes pleading for help. Just sign, Mom, Haley urged, pushing the pen closer. We can finally move forward. We can start to heal. Graham smiled, a gesture of pure victory. Crack! The sound was sharp, explosive in the small room. My mother yelped. Graham flinched, dropping the pen. It wasn't a gunshot. It was my grandfather's cane. He had brought it down, hard, on the mahogany leg of the coffee table. Everyone stared at him. Silence, Arthur Monroe said. His voice was thin with age, but it cut through the room like a razor. The manufactured empathy vanished from Haley's face, replaced by irritation. Grandpa, we're not done, she snapped. Mom hasn't signed. My daughter, Arthur said, his eyes fixed on Evelyn, ignoring Haley completely. Will not be signing those papers. Graham, you are dismissed. Graham bristled. Regaining his composure, he was used to managing difficult relatives. Mr. Monroe, with all due respect, I am the financial advisor retained by this family to— You are advising nothing, Arthur interrupted, his voice dropping. You are a vulture attempting to secure assets that are not, and never will be, available to you. Haley stood up. That is completely uncalled for. Graham is only trying to help. This is my mother's house, and we will— It is not. My grandfather leaned forward slowly. He reached for the ancient leather briefcase at his feet. The buckles were worn smooth. He clicked one open, clicked the other. The sounds were loud in the quiet room. He didn't pull out a stack of papers. He pulled out a single, heavy vellum envelope. It was yellowed with age, sealed not with glue, but with a thick disk of dark red wax, stamped with the family crest. He didn't hand it to anyone. He placed it on top of Graham's stack of Blue Ridge fiduciary documents, a declaration of war. This sorting, Arthur said, is concluded. Then, from inside his briefcase, he slid out a second document, This one was modern, a certified copy, stapled at the corner. He unfolded it deliberately and dropped it onto the table. The silence in the room was absolute. The only sound was the HVAC system kicking on, roaring into the vacuum. My grandfather's cane tapped the floor again. Once, tap. "The current owner of this house," Arthur Monroe announced, his voice steady, "is Tessa." My mother gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "What?" I looked at the deed. My name, Tessa Monroe, transferred and filed with the county clerk 6 months ago, while I was at a training rotation. Haley's face drained of all color. It wasn't the flush of anger. It was the white, clammy pallor of profound shock. She stared at the paper as if it were a snake. Graham North, the director of client transitions, the man who specialized in peace of mind, looked at the deed, then at Haley, then back at the deed. His professional mask didn't just slip, it shattered. He said it to Haley, a desperate, frantic whisper that the microphone in my watch caught perfectly. This was not in the plan. I slowly, deliberately, pushed myself up from the floor. I stood to my full height, brushing the carpet lint from my jeans. The blood rushed back to my legs. I finally met my sister's eyes. I felt the slight vibration of the watch against my skin. Still recording. I allowed myself the thinnest, sharpest smile. Whose plan? Graham? Graham's words hung in the air, thick and toxic. This was not in the plan. My grandfather's breathing was the only sound, slow and rhythmic. Haley looked like she had been struck. My mother was staring at the certified deed on the table, her hand covering her mouth. I watched my sister. I watched the rapid calculation in her eyes, the shock, the denial, the pivot to damage control. I saw the moment she realized the recording on my watch was irrelevant. My grandfather had just detonated a bomb that made my evidence look like a firecracker. But the evidence was everything. It was the why. It was the map that led us to this disastrous moment. My mind snapped back, sharp and clear, to 3 days ago. The plan hadn't started in this suffocating study. It started, as so many disasters do, with a mundane favor and a cracked piece of glass. Haley had been frantic. "Tess, you're on leave. You have time." I dropped my phone. "The screen is shattered, and I have a client call in 2 hours. Can you just run it down to the tech shop, please? You know how Graham gets about client optics." She handed me the phone, a top-of-the-line model, and a credit card. An errand, a simple, sisterly errand. I took it to Ridgeline Tech Repair, a small, cluttered shop tucked behind a brewery. The owner, Miguel Torres, was a man I knew from the VA outreach program. He was a former Marine, Force Recon. He had the quiet intensity of someone who had taken things apart and put them back together under gunfire. If anyone could handle a rush job, it was Miguel. I handed him the phone. "Hey, Miguel, my sister, Haley. She needs it back in 2 hours. Screen replacement." He grunted, placing it on his mat under a high-intensity lamp. "Client optics, right? Rich people problems." "You have no idea," I said, paying for the rush service with Haley's card. "I'll text you when it's ready. Go get coffee." I didn't even make it to the corner. My phone buzzed 90 minutes later. Text from Miguel. "Don't come to the shop. Meet me. Back alley. 5 minutes. Come alone." My training kicked in. That wasn't a text about a phone. That was an alert. I found him in the alley, leaning against the brick wall, the repaired phone in one hand and a small black object in the other. He wasn't wearing his work apron. He looked like the Marine he used to be. "What's wrong, Miguel?" He didn't look at me. He looked up and down the alley. "Who's your sister? Tessa?" "What do you mean?" "She's a financial planner. Works with her boyfriend." "That's her job. Who is she?" He finally met my eyes. "When I replace a screen, I have to run diagnostics. Make sure the digitizer is seated right. I run a test sequence. When I did, the OS glitched. Popped open her draft folder." "Okay, so?" "So," he said, his voice low. "She has a series of scheduled text messages. Set to send over the next 90 days. They're all going to one contact, saved only as R. He held up the phone, showing me the screen. My blood went cold. They weren't reminders. They were status updates. Cold, procedural, and terrifying. Scheduled. 48 hours. Subject. E.M. Evelyn Monroe. Transport confirmed. Intake forms filed. Scheduled. 10 days. Subject. Preliminary assessment filed. Re 204. Scheduled. 30 days. Subject. SGLI beneficiary transfer. Packet submitted. Awaiting proxy validation. Scheduled. 60 days. Subject. Final review. Emergency guardianship hearing docketed. Scheduled. 90 days. Subject. Finalize. Transfer complete. To be executed while Team M, Tessa Monroe, is deployed. I stared at the last one. While TM is deployed. Me. They were waiting for me to leave. The acronym SGLI leaped off the screen. A neon sign of betrayal. Service members' group life insurance, my life insurance, a policy I had taken out when I joined, naming my mother as primary beneficiary and Haley as secondary, in case something happened to both of us. Haley was trying to change it. She's trying to transfer my death benefits, I whispered. She's trying to do more than that, Miguel said. Guardianship. That means she's moving on your mother, and she's using your deployment as the window to do it. He pressed the phone back into my hand. It felt contaminated. Miguel, what's this? I pointed to the black object in his other hand. It's an encrypted drive, military grade, he said. I did a full data clone, the diagnostics. I ran them deeper than usual. This drive has everything. Her emails, her deleted files, her location data for the last 6 months. Whatever this is, the plan is on here. He pushed it into my palm. His hand was rough, calloused. Go home, Tessa. Change the locks on your house. Change your bank pins. Change your mother's, too. Tonight. Miguel, you can't. This is illegal. This is a threat assessment, he said, cutting me off. I saw this kind of stuff in Helmand, not the suits, but the planning. This is an operation. Your sister is running an operation against your family. Go, now. I didn't go home. I went to my small, anonymous rental office, a room with blacked-out windows that I kept for sensitive case reviews. I plugged the drive into a clean laptop, one that had never touched a public network. My hands were shaking, not with fear, but with a cold, precise rage. I opened a new encrypted file. I typed the header. Case file. HM. Haley Monroe. Subject. Evelyn Monroe. Subject. Tessa Monroe. Hypothesis. Coordinated conspiracy to seize assets and control. Motive. Financial. Greed. I began to dig. The data clone was perfect. Miguel was a professional. I started with the timeline. The 90-day clock. Haley was preparing for an emergency guardianship hearing. She was planning to have our mother, Evelyn, declared incompetent. The texts to R were the framework. Now I needed the details. I started with Graham North. A simple LinkedIn search told me what he wanted the world to see. Director of Client Transitions at Blue Ridge Fiduciary. A glowing profile, full of jargon about holistic legacy planning and securing generational peace of mind. Then I cross-referenced his name with the state legal database. 3 complaints in the last 5 years, all sealed, all settled out of court, all filed by the adult children of elderly clients who had suddenly, inexplicably, changed their wills, proxies, and beneficiaries, leaving everything to newly acquired financial managers associated with Blue Ridge. Graham North wasn't a director of client transitions. He was a predator who specialized in the elderly. I went back to the data drive. I ran a search for his name. I found the emails, dozens of them, not just to his public address, but to a secondary, internal account. north@blueridgefidem.com. And then I found the other account, the one that stopped my breathing. Haley, m@blueridgefid.com. My sister didn't have a Blue Ridge email address because she was a client. She had one because she was an employee, or at best, a paid contractor, a collaborator. This wasn't Graham manipulating my sister. This was my sister, shoulder to shoulder with him, running the same playbook on her own mother. The rage was so cold it burned. Observe, record. I kept digging. I focused on the PDF files. They were the tools, the forms for the proxy, the templates for the medical directives, the applications for the guardianship. And that's when I saw the metadata. Metadata is the digital fingerprint. It tells you who created a document, when it was modified, and who uploaded it. Two of the most critical files, the medical evaluation for my mother and the asset transfer request, had the same digital fingerprint. Uploader: Haley, am at blueridgefied.com. Haley hadn't just received these forms, she had uploaded them into the Blue Ridge system. She was building the case herself. I opened the medical evaluation. It was from a geriatric specialist I had never heard of, Dr. Calder-Wells. It painted a picture of my mother as confused, paranoid, and incapable of managing her own affairs. It was dated from a visit 2 weeks ago. It looked legitimate, professional letterhead, watermarks. But something was wrong. The address. 1120 Alpine Road, Suite 240. I knew that building, my mother's actual doctor, the one she had seen for 15 years, was in that building, but he was in Suite 204. I had been there a dozen times. I pulled up the building directory online. Suite 240 did not exist. It was a utility closet. Haley and Graham had fabricated a medical assessment from a non-existent office, using a real doctor's name, all to build their case for guardianship. It was a simple, intentional typo. 204 became 240, an easy mistake to overlook, but a fatal flaw in their plan. It was sloppy, it was arrogant. I sat back, the glow of the monitor lighting the dark room. The plan was clear now. It wasn't just about the house, it was about everything. I drew 3 red circles on my digital notepad. Link 1. The fake medical assessment. The typo, from 204 to 240, was the key. It created the legal basis to declare my mother incompetent. Link 2. The fraudulent proxy. With Mom declared incompetent, Haley would use the temporary power of attorney to gain full control, the one she had tried to get my mother to sign tonight. Link 3. The beneficiary transfer. With full proxy control, Haley would be able to access my files, my accounts, and my SGLI. She would change the beneficiary from my mother to herself, arguing that my incompetent mother could no longer manage the funds. And the entire plan hinged on one critical factor: me. I had to be gone. My upcoming deployment rotation was their deadline. They needed me out of the country, unreachable, unable to contest the hearing. And if I wasn't deployed, they needed to discredit me. The unstable soldier, the absent daughter, the volatile, unreliable Tessa who was too busy with her military career to care for her family, the woman who didn't even deserve a chair at the table. They had pushed that narrative for years. Now they were trying to codify it into law. My grandfather's voice yanked me back to the present. "Haley," he said, his voice quiet but carrying the weight of the mountains. "Did you truly believe I would let this happen?" Haley, white-faced, stared at the deed. "You had no right. You went behind our backs. Mom, he went behind our backs." My mother, for the first time, didn't shrink. She looked from the deed to Haley. "He protected me." "He protected her!" Haley shrieked, her finger jabbing at me. "It was always her. The soldier, the hero. While I stayed here, I was the one who took care of Grandma. I was the one who managed this house." "And you are the one," I said, my voice as cold and quiet as the data on Miguel's drive, "who was trying to have our mother declared incompetent." The accusation hit the air, and the room finally, completely, fractured. The explosion of my grandfather's announcement that I owned the house had left a crater in its wake. Graham had gathered his useless Blue Ridge fiduciary papers with jerky, furious movements, and left, his parting glare at Haley promising retribution. Haley had screamed, then cried, then finally stormed out, leaving my mother shaking and my grandfather looking 100 years old. The meeting was over. The war had just been publicly declared. 2 days later, I went to my mother's house. The air was still thick with betrayal. She had been calling me, alternating between tears and confusion. I let myself in with my old key, finding her at the dining room table, her hands clasped around a cold cup of tea. The table was not empty. It was covered, corner to corner, with the evidence of Haley's campaign. Graham was gone, but his ghost remained. Here was the streamlining he and Haley had planned, laid out in neat, insidious stacks. Folders labeled, Evelyn Monroe, Future Planning. Folders labeled, Estate Logistics. Folders labeled, Legacy Care. The language was soft, caring. The intent was brutal. I picked up a document from the Legacy Care stack, Co-Authority Medical Consent Form. My stomach clenched. It gave Haley joint authority over all of my mother's medical decisions. It was, in effect, a medical power of attorney. And it was already signed. My mother's signature was there, looking slightly shaky, and beneath it was mine, Tessa Monroe. I stared at it. I had never seen this document before in my life. I would never sign it. I tilted the paper under the light. It was a forgery, but not a sophisticated one. It was a high-resolution scan, a digital cut-and-paste job. I knew exactly where it came from. The sharp, precise signature was identical to the one on my tax returns from 2 years ago, a copy of which I knew Haley kept in the family files. They hadn't even bothered to get a fresh signature. They had just lifted one. They were that arrogant. They were that certain no one would ever check. "Evelyn," I said, my voice quiet. I always called her Mom. Using her name snapped her head up. She looked at the paper in my hand, and her face crumpled. "She told me you'd seen it. Tessa, Haley, she said you two had discussed it, and you'd already signed off? She said it was just a formality for me to add mine." "When did you sign this?" I asked, keeping my voice level. "A few weeks ago. I think right after I had that fall. Haley brought over a big stack. Said it was just to protect me in case it happened again. She said it would make it easier for you, so you wouldn't have to fly home from the base every time. She was using my service against my mother. My absence wasn't a liability. It was the entire foundation of their plan." "She lied," I said simply. "I have never seen this. This is not my signature." "Oh, Tessa, oh, no." She started to tremble. While I was there, my phone buzzed on the table. A new text from an unknown number. It contained only 3 words. "Don't interfere." I stared at the message. It was a warning. It meant they were watching. They knew I was here. They knew I was undoing their work. I slipped the phone back into my pocket. "Observe, record." "Mom," I said, sitting beside her, taking the pen from her cup. I pulled a blank sheet of notepaper from the pad by her phone. "I need you to do something for me, and it's very important that you do it right now, while we are sitting here." I handed her the pen. "I need you to write down today's date, and then I need you to write, 'I, Evelyn Monroe, have not signed any medical or financial power of attorney forms presented to me by Haley Monroe or Graham North,' and then I need you to sign it." "Tessa, I don't understand. I did sign that one." "You signed it based on a lie. You signed it under fraudulent pretenses. This note," I tapped the blank paper, "is our evidence, it's you, of sound mind, stating your intent. Please, just write it." Her hand was shaking, but she did it. She wrote the words, her familiar cursive looping across the page, and signed her name. I took the paper, folded it, and put it in my jacket pocket. It was a crucial piece of the puzzle. It was my mother's voice, on paper, contradicting the narrative Haley was building. "Don't sign anything else," I said, my voice gentle but firm. "Nothing, not a credit card slip, not a delivery receipt, not a birthday card, not until you show it to me or my grandfather first. Do you understand?" She nodded. tears welling. "What is she doing, Tessa? What is she doing?" "She's making bad choices," I said. "But we're not going to let her." That night, I did not go back to my apartment. I went to the rental office. Then I went to the hardware store. At 11 p.m., I was at my own apartment, changing the deadbolts. I was a reserve officer. I didn't have much. A small, clean apartment, mostly empty, but it was my space. And after the text message, I considered it compromised. I installed 3 new locks, and then I installed the cameras. They were tiny, pinhole lens cameras, the kind we used in surveillance training. One faced my front door, one faced the small balcony, one faced the desk where I kept my personal laptop. I networked them to a secure cloud-based server, accessible only from my clean phone. If they were watching me, I would watch them back. At 2 a.m, fueled by coffee and a cold, simmering anger, I plugged Miguel's encrypted drive back into my clean laptop. The Bennett chat log was calling to me. The first time I'd read it, I had been looking for what. Now, I was looking for who. I'd missed it. It wasn't a chat log with a person named Bennett. Bennett was a code. It was Haley's private log, notes to herself, disguised as a conversation. And as I scrolled through the data I had missed, I found the entry that confirmed everything. It was dated 3 weeks ago, the day after she'd supposedly taken my mother to the clinic. Log. Bennett. Spoke to S. North. Letterhead secured. He says the letterhead for 204 is watermarked. Too hard to fake. He found a printer who can replicate the old letterhead from the clinic's previous address. It's a perfect match. Just need to change the suite number. Change 204 to 240. It's a clean typo. No one will ever notice. E.M. Didn't even read the forms. Just signed where I told her. Moving to next phase. My hands tightened into fists, hunched 204 to 240. There it was. Not a mistake. Not an oversight. It was a deliberate, premeditated act of forgery, discussed with Graham North, to create the foundational lie of their entire case. The next morning, Haley came to my apartment. She knocked, a cheerful, sisterly rat-tat-tat. I watched her on the pinhole camera feed for a full 30 seconds. She was dressed down, yoga pants and a fleece, holding a box of pastries. The picture of the caring sister, checking in after the family drama. I opened the door. "Tess, oh, thank God." She pushed past me, placing the box on my counter. "I was so worried. After Grandpa, after that performance, I can't believe he did that to us, to Mom." She was playing the victim. It was her best role. "He seemed pretty clear," I said, leaning against the counter, leaving the new locks visible on the door. "He's old. Tess, he's confused, and he's always favored you." She turned, her eyes full of practiced sincerity. "This whole thing, this house, it's a mess, and Mom is caught in the middle. I'm just trying to protect her. That's all I've ever tried to do." By having her declared incompetent? The question was flat. I hadn't planned to say it, but her performance was suffocating. Haley didn't flinch. She had rehearsed this. Not incompetent. Protected. There is a difference. You're never here. Tessa, you don't see her. She's forgetting things. She fell. She needs someone here, on the ground, to manage things. That's all Graham and I were trying to set up. Just a safety net. "That safety net," I said, picking up a croissant I had no intention of eating, "started with a medical report from that clinic on Alpine Road." "Yes, Dr. Wells, a top specialist," she said smoothly. "Right, in Suite 240, I said, taking a bite. "You know, I was driving by there yesterday. It's funny, they still use their old letterhead." "Huh?" "The one from before they moved into that suite." I watched her. I didn't blink. It was a perfect microscopic tell. Her eyes, they didn't just flicker, they darted. A rapid left-right-left movement, a neural pathway firing, accessing the lie, checking the file, confirming the detail. It lasted less than a second, but it was there. It was the crack in the ice. She recovered instantly. The anger she had been feigning became real. A flush rising on her neck, What are you implying? She snapped. You see? This is what you do. You fly in here, Mr. Investigator, and you treat us all like suspects. You have no idea what it's like. You have no idea what I've been managing while you've been off playing soldier. She advanced on me, her voice rising. I am trying to hold this family together. I am trying to protect our mother from herself. And you? You come in here with your accusations and your judgment. I'm not judging. Haley, I said, my voice dangerously calm. I put the croissant down. I'm just reviewing the evidence. Evidence? She scoffed. There is no evidence. There is just a family that needs help. And if you're not going to be part of the solution, then get out of the way. I think, I said, walking to the door and opening it. That's my line. If there's no deception, Haley, there's no reason to fear the evidence, right? She stared at me, her face a mask of indignation. She snatched her purse from the counter and stormed out, leaving the box of pastries behind. You'll regret this, Tessa, she spat from the hallway. When Mom gets hurt, and you're 1,000 miles away, you will regret this. I closed the door. I double-locked the new deadbolts. The conversation was exactly what I needed. Her reaction to Sweet 240 was the confirmation. Her defensiveness was the proof of her guilt. My anger was gone. It had burned away, leaving something cold and hard in its place, a plan. She thought I was judging. She thought I was digging. She was right. That night, the second threat came. I was at my desk, mapping the connections. Graham, Haley, Bennett, Blue Ridge, Sweet 240. It was a spider web, and I was pulling on the first thread. I heard it, a faint schlick from the hallway. I muted my computer. I stood up, my hand instinctively going to the empty space on my hip where my service weapon would normally be. I moved to the door, my eye to the peephole. The hallway was empty, but on the floor, halfway under my door, was a plain white envelope. My heart hammered. This wasn't a text. This was a physical presence. Someone had stood right outside my door, right where my camera couldn't see them, and pushed this through. I didn't open the door. I nudged the envelope the rest of the way in with my foot. I waited 5 full minutes, listening. Nothing. Finally, I picked it up. It was cheap stationery. My name wasn't on it. Inside was a single piece of paper, the kind from a cheap office printer. 4 words, printed in bold, sans serif font. Stop digging, soldier. The use of that word, soldier. It was a threat, but it was also a mistake. It was a confirmation of who their target was. It wasn't just Tessa Monroe, the daughter. It was Tessa Monroe, the investigator. They were trying to scare me. I looked at the note. I looked at the new locks on my door. I thought of the fabricated signature, the non-existent office, and my mother's terrified, handwritten note. My anger, which had been a cold fire, now solidified. It turned into a block of ice. They wanted me to stop digging. I was about to bring in an excavator. They thought they were setting a trap for my mother. I was about to set one for them. The note lay on my desk. Stop digging. Soldier. My anger had cooled overnight, settling into a hard, dense core of operational focus. The threat didn't scare me. It clarified my objective. They weren't just greedy. They were sloppy. And they were getting nervous. The next morning, I was standing in the lobby of the Alpine Road Medical Plaza at 8:30 a.m. Just as the offices opened, I ignored the elevator and took the stairs. I needed the time to center myself, to transition from investigator to concerned daughter. I found Suite 204 precisely where I knew it would be. The office of Dr. Calder-Wells was quiet, professional, and smelled of antiseptic and old magazines. A pleasant receptionist looked up as I approached. Good morning. How can I help you? I took a breath. Hi, my name is Tessa Monroe. I'm here about my mother, Evelyn Monroe. I pulled the fraudulent medical evaluation from my bag. I had made a high-quality copy. I would never let the original out of my sight. My sister, she brought my mother here a few weeks ago for an evaluation, but the paperwork she gave us has a different suite number. and I just wanted to verify. Well, frankly, I'm very confused. I handed her the paper. She looked at it, her brow furrowing. Evelyn Monroe? She typed the name into her system. I'm sorry. We have no patient by that name. That's what I was afraid of, I said, keeping my voice steady, tinged with worry. My sister, Haley, handled it. She gave us this. It has Dr. Wells's name on it, I pointed. But it says Suite 240. The receptionist's confusion turned to a slight, professional offense. Ma'am, there is no Suite 240 in this building. That's the utility corridor. We are Suite 204. We've been here for 15 years. I know. I've been here before, I said. Look, I know this is strange, but this document, this exact document, is being used to file a legal petition against my mother using Dr. Wells's name. Her eyes widened. She understood immediately. This was no longer a scheduling error. Let me get the doctor, she said, rising from her desk. 5 minutes later, I was in a small office with Dr. Calder Wells. He was an older man, sharp-eyed, with a palpable air of no nonsense. He held the fraudulent document by the very edges, as if it were contaminated. This, he said, his voice tight with anger, is a fabrication. It is not my letterhead. Our new letterhead has had a watermark since 2019. That is not my signature. It's a poor imitation. And as my assistant told you, Suite 240 is a broom closet. Dr. Wells, I said, leaning forward, this document is being submitted to the court as the primary evidence in an emergency guardianship hearing to declare my mother incompetent. The hearing is likely to be scheduled in the next few days. He looked up from the paper, his eyes like steel chips. They are committing fraud, using my name, my license. He looked at me. Ms. Monroe, what do you need? I need a formal statement, an affidavit, if you're willing, stating that you have never treated Evelyn Monroe, that this document is a forgery, and that your office is not, and has never been, Suite 240. He didn't hesitate. Janet, he called to his assistant, get a notary up here, and get my lawyer on the phone. An hour later, I walked out of Suite 204 with a signed, notarized affidavit from Dr. Calder Wells, denying any and all connection to the fraudulent report. The first concrete block of my counteroffensive was in place. Next, I needed to bait the primary target. I drove to Switchback Coffee, a local place with reclaimed wood tables and loud grinders. It was the kind of place Graham North would despise, which made it perfect. I sat at a small table in the back and texted him. Graham, that meeting was a disaster. My grandfather is out of control, but I've been thinking. You were right about one thing. I need to get my own planning in order. I'm in Raven Ridge for a few more weeks. Any chance you're free for that coffee? I'd like to hear about Blue Ridge, from a professional perspective. He replied in less than 60 seconds. On my way, 20 minutes. I opened the voice recorder app on my phone. I checked the state statutes again. Colorado was a one-party consent state. As a participant in the conversation, my consent was the only one required. I set the phone on the table, screen down, next to my keys, and hit record. He walked in exactly 20 minutes later, all sharp suit and cologne, oozing condescending charm. He thought I was capitulating. He thought I was the unstable soldier, running scared, looking for an alliance now that Grandpa had pulled the rug out from under him. Tessa, he said, sliding into the booth, his smile wide. I'm so glad you reached out. I was worried about you. That was quite a scene your grandfather caused. It was a mess, I said, playing the part. He doesn't understand. And Haley, she's not answering my calls. I'm worried about Mom. And honestly, I'm worried about my own assets. As you should be, he said, leaning in. Blue Ridge specializes in clients with complex situations, military, medical professionals, people who aren't always on grid to manage their own affairs. That's me, I said. I'm gone half the year. I'm worried about my SGLI, my retirement accounts. Haley mentioned she was helping me organize those. She is, Graham said smoothly. Haley's heart is in the right place. She just wants to protect your mother. This guardianship, it's just a safety net. Frankly, the house deed complicates things, but it's manageable. Manageable how? His smile tightened, the charm offensive fading as he moved to the core of his message. Look, your grandfather is an old man. This deed he produced. There are ways to contest that. Undue influence, lack of capacity. It's a fight. A long, public, expensive fight. He sipped the espresso he'd ordered. Or, there's a simple path. You sign on with Haley. You support the guardianship proxy. You agree that she should be the primary manager. It's the smart move. We consolidate the assets, including the house, into a trust. Everything is protected. Everything is clean. I let the silence hang for a moment. And what if I don't? I asked. What if I fight it? What if I side with my grandfather? Graham North stopped smiling. He leaned across the table, his voice dropping to a confidential, menacing purr, the sound of a predator closing in. You don't want to do that, Tessa. That's the messy path. You fight this. It all goes public. Court filings, public records, allegations, your mother's condition, her confusion, her inability to care for herself. All of it becomes part of the public record. Your instability as an absent daughter, your military deployments, that all becomes a factor. He tapped his finger on the table. Just authorize Haley. Let her take the lead. Everything will be quiet. Everything will be protected. If you don't, well, it's going to get very, very complicated. For everyone, and especially for you. Think about your security clearance. Got it. The threat was clear. Cooperate, or he would destroy my mother's reputation and my career. I picked up my phone, stopping the recording as I slid it into my pocket. Evidence packet. Item 2. You've given me a lot to think about, Graham, I said, standing up. A whole lot. I walked out, leaving him with his coffee and his smug, self-satisfied smirk. He thought he had just cowed me into submission. He had no idea he had just handed me the rope. When I got back to my apartment, an official-looking envelope was taped to my door. It wasn't a friendly note. It was a legal summons. Haley had done it. I tore it open, my hands steady. Emergency petition for guardianship of Evelyn Monroe. Petitioner, Haley Monroe. And the hearing date? 3 days from now. It was a blitz. They were trying to ram this through before I could mount a defense. I scanned the attached documents. It was all there. The fraudulent medical evaluation from Dr. Wells, Suite 240, and 2 sworn affidavits from concerned third parties who had witnessed Evelyn Monroe's cognitive decline. I ran the names. They were both employees at Blue Ridge Fiduciary, Graham's colleagues. This wasn't a house of cards. It was a cesspool. I didn't panic. I didn't get angry. I got to work. I picked up my clean phone and dialed the number of the only person I knew who was as precise and as vicious in a fight as I was. Jared Wolfe, attorney at law. Jared, it's Tessa Monroe. Tessa, hell of a time to call. This isn't about that disaster of a hike in Estes Park, is it? No, I said. It's worse. I'm sending an encrypted file to your work email. I have a fraudulent guardianship hearing in 3 days. I need a temporary restraining order, a continuance, and I need you to look at a file of precompiled evidence. There was a pause. The friendly tone was gone, replaced by the lawyer. Sending it now? Sending it now. I forwarded him the entire case file, the data from Miguel's drive, the Bennett log, the notarized affidavit from Dr. Calder Wells, and the 60-second MP3 file I had just recorded at Switchback Coffee, which I titled, G. North Threatens Clearance. An hour later, my phone rang. It was Jared. Tessa, he said, his voice flat. This isn't a family dispute. This is criminal conspiracy. This audio file. This is racketeering. What they're doing to your mother is elder abuse. What they're threatening you with is extortion. Can you stop the hearing? Stop it? I'm going to blow it out of the water, he spat. I'm filing for an emergency continuance based on the fraudulent evidence. I'm filing a TRO to block Haley from touching any of your mother's accounts, and I'm submitting your evidence packet directly to the judge's clerk, ex parte, with a request for sanctions against their attorney for filing this garbage. He took a breath. Now, listen to me. They did this fast because they expect you to break. They are counting on you to be the unstable soldier. They want you to show up and start screaming. They need you to look volatile. You will not. You will not call Haley. You will not text Graham. You will not even speak to your mother without me on the line. Your only job is to be calm. You are a witness. You are not a participant. Let me handle the fight. Understood, I said. Good. Now, what else have you got? One last thing, I said, opening my laptop. While I waited, I had done one final search. Not on Graham, on Haley. I'm looking at the Colorado State Fiduciary Registry, I said, reading the screen. Blue Ridge Fiduciary, registered agents, and a list of official associates. Her name is on it, Haley Monroe. Jared let out a low whistle. She's not a client. She's an agent. She's a co-conspirator. That changes everything. That's not just influence. That's collusion. The last piece of the puzzle clicked into place. This wasn't my sister being manipulated. This was my sister, getting a paycheck. My phone beeped with another call. It was my grandfather. I clicked over. Tessa? Grandpa, I have a lawyer. Jared Wolf. He's filing to stop the hearing. He will be successful, Arthur said, his voice frail but firm. They have served your mother. The papers are on her table. Haley is not answering her phone. Jared is handling it. Grandpa. Good. Now, I need you to come to my house. Not your mother's, mine. When I arrived, he was in his study, the same one where this had all begun. The air was different, colder. He reached into his ancient leather briefcase. He didn't pull out the deed. He pulled out the other envelope, the one I had seen before, heavy vellum, sealed with dark red wax. Your lawyer will fight them on the guardianship, he said, his hand trembling slightly as he held it out to me. But they will pivot. They will attack the house. They will attack me. They will claim I was incompetent, or that I coerced you. I took the envelope. It was heavy. This is the original, fully executed trust instrument. Your lawyer is not to open this, not unless they are in open court, and they challenge my authority or the validity of that deed. This is my answer. Let them commit to the lie, and then you use this. I held the envelope. It felt like a weapon. They think because you are a soldier, you respond with force, my grandfather said, looking at me, his eyes clear. They are wrong. A soldier responds with strategy. Jared had filed the motion for continuance. The emergency hearing was still a dark thundercloud on the horizon, technically scheduled, but he had successfully filed our initial evidence packet, the fraudulent medical report, the affidavit from the real Dr. Wells, the audio of Graham threatening my security clearance. The court was aware. But that was the problem. We had shown our hand. Haley and Graham now knew we were actively investigating. They knew we had proof of their fraud. They had been served. They were cornered, and a cornered animal is the most dangerous kind. I couldn't sleep. The quiet of my apartment felt too thin. The note, "Stop digging, soldier," was pinned to my desk. It was a promise. At 2 a.m, I was back at my rental office, the encrypted drive from Miguel's shop humming in the laptop. He had shown me how to check for recent file modifications. Haley, in her monumental arrogance, was still using the same phone. She was still using the Bennett log. She had made an entry just hours after Jared's filing had been served to her. She was panicking, and her panic was making her sloppy. It wasn't a long note, just 2 lines, appended to the bottom of her existing plan. Log. Bennett, J. Wolf filed. They know about 240. Hearing will be stalled. G says move to Plan B. Heater, timing, leave before 11. Final attempt. Heater. My blood didn't just run cold. It stopped. It wasn't a code. It was a piece of equipment. I saw it instantly. A vivid, sickening flash of memory. My mother's garage. It was an old, detached, single-car garage, built in the 50s, crammed with 30 years of storage. The main roll-up door was electric, but the side door, the small, human-sized exit, was warped. It hadn't closed properly in a decade. It always stuck in the frame. In the summer humidity, you had to throw your shoulder into it to get it open. It was an enclosed, nearly airtight box. And the heater, an old, heavy, propane-fueled utility heater that my father used to use when he was working on the car in winter. I remembered the smell, not of propane, of vanilla. Haley, for the last 6 months, she had been obsessed with bringing my mother those giant, 3-wick vanilla candles. She'd burn them constantly when she was at the house, claiming it freshened the place up. The smell was cloying, synthetic, strong enough to sting the eyes. Strong enough to mask another smell. The smell of propane, the scentless, odorless poison of carbon monoxide. Leave before 11. My mother's routine. She watched the 10 o'clock news and went to bed by 10:45. If Haley and Graham were there, if they brought dinner, if they lit the candles to mask the smell, if they turned on that ancient, unvented heater in the enclosed garage. A tragic accident, an old woman, perhaps confused, overcome by fumes in her own garage, and with the absent soldier daughter miles away, the caring daughter, Haley, would be there to take control. This was no longer about money. This was no longer about a house. This was an execution plan. I grabbed my clean phone. I called Miguel. "I need you," I said, my voice flat. "Now, my mother's house. It's plan B." He didn't ask questions. "I'm 5 minutes out. I'm bringing my kit." He met me on the street corner. We didn't waste time. My mother was an early riser. She went for a walk every morning at 6:30 a.m., a route Haley knew by heart. The moment her car was gone, we moved. I used my own key to let us into the house. Miguel went straight to the garage. I stood in the doorway, the stench hitting me immediately. Vanilla, overpowering. Haley had already been there. A fresh candle, the size of a paint can, sat on the workbench, unlit, and the heater, it was plugged into the wall, the thick yellow propane tank standing beside it. The valve was turned, just slightly, a faint, oily hissing sound. She was prepping the air. I moved to the side door. I grabbed the knob and pulled. It didn't budge. I threw my hip into it. The wood groaned, but it was swollen tight. It was a death trap. "Tessa," Miguel said, his voice sharp. He was pointing at the heater's plug. I knelt. I unplugged it from the wall. I walked over to the propane tank and twisted the valve shut until my fingers ached. "She was here," I whispered, the rage making my vision swim. She was already here. "She'll be back," Miguel said. He was all business. He pulled a device from his bag. No bigger than a quarter. "Microdot, audio transmitter. Where?" "Under the workbench, the lip, right there." He affixed it in half a second. "It's live. I'll be in the van. 2 streets over. I'll hear every word." "Miguel, if she comes back, she's not alone. Graham will be with her." "Good." He looked at me, his eyes hard. "You wearing a wire?" "Body cam," I said. I pulled my flannel shirt from my bag, the pinhole lens already fixed, looking like a simple black button. I put it on, securing the battery pack at the small of my back. "Tessa," he said, grabbing my arm, "this is not a drill. This is not Red Cliffs. That hearing Jared filed for? That's over. This is criminal. The second they move toward that heater, the second they mention gas, I'm calling it in. I am not waiting for your signal. You understand me?" "Understood," I said. I was a soldier. He was my overwatch. We aired out the garage, opening the big roll-up door, letting the cold Colorado air dilute the vanilla and propane. We left the side door stuck. We left the heater exactly where it was. We left the candle. We left the unplugged cord lying on the concrete floor. I stayed at the house. I made my mother breakfast. I told her I was worried about the old wiring in the garage and that I was waiting for an electrician. I didn't have to wait long. At 6 p.m., Haley texted my mother. Mom, Graham and I are so sorry. We heard about the lawyers. It's all a huge misunderstanding. We were just trying to help. We're bringing over dinner. We have the real papers. The ones you actually wanted. Can we please just sit down, sign them, and put all of this behind us? My mother, desperate for peace, her hand shaking, texted back, Yes, please. They arrived at 7. Graham was holding his polished leather briefcase. Haley was holding a large paper bag from my mother's favorite Thai restaurant. The performance was flawless. They were contrite, apologetic, heartbroken. Mom, I am so sorry, Haley said, hugging her. I just wanted to protect you. Things got complicated. Graham, my mother said, looking at him. Tessa said you work for Blue Ridge? I did, Graham said, the lie sliding off his tongue like oil. I tendered my resignation this morning. I told them I could not, in good conscience, work for a firm that would treat my family like that. My only priority is you. Evelyn, is Haley. It was masterful. They were repositioning themselves as victims of the evil corporation. We sat at the dining room table. I was silent. My body cam was recording. Miguel was listening. We brought the real forms, Haley said, pulling a thin folder from her purse. Not from Graham's briefcase, from hers. This just assigns me as your medical proxy. That's all. The one we talked about. No finances, no house, just so I can talk to your doctors. The one Tessa already agreed to. She slid it over. I saw my forged signature, the same one I'd seen before. You know, Haley said, her smile suddenly too bright. It is so stuffy in here, all this legal junk. I left those new vanilla candles I bought you in the garage. Mom, let's just go out there and grab them. We can talk. Just us girls. Get some air. She was trying to separate me from my mother. No, I said, standing up. All 3 of them looked at me. Let's all go, I said. My voice was calm, but the mask was off. It's a family discussion, right, Graham? You're part of this simplified plan. The smiles vanished. The air in the room crackled. I led the way. I walked to the garage, opened the door, and flipped on the single, buzzing fluorescent light. It was cold. The smell of vanilla was almost gone, replaced by the damp odor of concrete and old oil. Haley walked in. Her eyes scanned the room. She saw the heater. She saw the unlit candle, and she saw the plug, lying inert and useless on the floor, 2 feet from the wall socket. Her face, for the second time in a week, drained of all color. She knew. Looking for this, Haley? I asked. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't have to. I stepped over and picked up the heavy-duty plug. It's Plan B, right? She recoiled, her back hitting the workbench. I don't know what you're talking about. No? I pulled my phone from my pocket. I had isolated the audio note. I pressed play. Her own voice filled the small, cold space, a panicked, tinny recording of herself. G says we move to Plan B. Heater, timing, leave before 11. Final attempt. Haley stared at the phone as if it were a snake. Graham lunged, not at me, at the phone. That's illegal, he roared. You recorded her. That is completely inadmissible. You have no right. I didn't move. Wrong, I said, my voice cutting through his. She recorded herself, Graham. That's her own metadata, in her own Bennett log, and as for my recordings... I tapped the black button on my flannel shirt. This body camera is currently active, and my partner, Miguel Torres, is on a live feed, listening to this entire conversation. Graham froze. He knew what body cam and live feed meant. He knew the legal difference. And as if summoned by the word, we all heard it. Faint, distant, but closing fast, the unmistakable woo-eep of a Raven Ridge patrol car. Miguel had made the call the second we were all in the garage. That's when Haley broke. It wasn't a calculated performance. It was a full-scale implosion, a raw, guttural wail of absolute panic. She slid down the workbench. collapsing onto the dusty concrete floor, her body folding in on itself. "No, no, no, no," she shrieked, the sound echoing off the walls. "It was just an idea. It was a draft. I wasn't going to do it. I would never. Graham, tell them. Tell them I wasn't going to do it." Graham stared at her, his face a mask of white-hot fury and terror. He had been outmaneuvered, and he knew it. Headlights swept across the open garage door, bathing us in blue and red. 2 officers stepped out, their expressions grim, hands on their holsters. I walked out of the garage to meet them, my hands open and visible. "Officer," I said, my voice shaking just enough to be authentic. "My name is Tessa Monroe. That is my mother. Evelyn, my sister, Haley, and her partner, Graham North, are in the garage. I believe I have evidence of an ongoing attempt to commit elder abuse, financial fraud, and I think they were trying to harm my mother." The police separated us instantly. One officer took Graham, who was already blustering about lawyers and illegal recordings. The other, a woman, went to Haley, who was still on the floor, hysterical and incoherent. I went to my mother. She was standing in the doorway, her hands over her mouth, shaking violently. She had heard everything. The audio log, the heater, Plan B. "Mom," I said, pulling her away from the flashing lights, back into the warmth of the kitchen. "Go inside. Lock the door. I'm here. It's over." "Tessa," she whispered, her eyes wide with a horror I had never seen before. That note, the heater, what was she doing?" I handed the lead officer the unplugged heater as evidence. I airdropped him the audio file. I gave him the metadata printout, the copy of the fraudulent medical report, and Jared's business card. I put my arm around my mother. "I'm here," I said, my voice firm. "No one is signing anything tonight." The garage incident was a tactical game-changer. The arrival of the Raven Ridge police, the formal collection of the unplugged heater, the body cam footage, and my phone with Haley's Plan B audio note turned a family dispute into a criminal file. Graham and Haley were questioned at the scene, their frantic, contradictory stories noted by the officers. They were released, but the investigation was active. Jared Wolfe, my lawyer, moved with lightning speed. He took the police incident report, added it to our existing evidence packet, and filed an emergency motion for an immediate stay on the guardianship hearing. He didn't just request a continuance. He alleged that the petition itself was an act of attempted fraud and a precursor to physical harm. The court granted the stay instantly. The emergency hearing for the guardianship was postponed, rescheduled for the following Monday as a full evidentiary review. The intervening 3 days were a suffocating, pressurized silence. My mother, in a state of profound shock, went to stay with my grandfather. She couldn't bear to be in her own home, the scene of the plot. I stayed at my apartment, the new locks bolted, the pinhole cameras recording empty rooms, and my laptop open as I went over the case with Jared, preparing for the hearing. On Monday morning, we walked into the county courthouse. It was 8:50 a.m. The probate courtroom was small, sterile, and painted a depressing shade of institutional beige. There was no jury, just a judge's bench, 2 tables, and a profound, heavy silence. I wore my service uniform, not the combat fatigues, but the formal, pressed Class A uniform. Jared had insisted. "They used soldier as a weapon," he'd said. "Today, we use it as armor. Let the judge see exactly who they were maligning." My mother sat in the front row, pale but resolute, my grandfather beside her. I looked at the respondents' table. Haley was there. She looked small and broken, her face puffy from crying, her usual impeccable gloss stripped away. She was staring at her hands. Her lawyer, a man I didn't recognize, looked anxious, shuffling papers. The chair next to Haley, the one that should have been occupied by Graham North, was empty. Jared leaned toward me, his voice a low whisper. "I got a call from the district attorney's office an hour ago. Graham's lawyer has been making informal inquiries all weekend. He's trying to cut a deal. He's flipping. He's trading Haley to save himself. She was alone. They had arrived as a team, but she was going to burn by herself. "All rise," the bailiff called. Judge Pineda entered. She looked like she had already read the entire file and was deeply unhappy about it. She sat, adjusted her glasses, and looked at Haley. "This is the matter of the emergency guardianship of Evelyn Monroe, petitioned by Haley Monroe, Mr. Davies," she said to Haley's lawyer. "Your client filed this petition. She may proceed with her testimony." Haley took the stand. Her lawyer guided her through the rehearsed script. It was the same one she had tried on me. I was just so worried," Haley whispered, her voice cracking. "My mother, she had a terrible fall. She's been confused, forgetting things, and my sister," she glanced at me. "Tessa is wonderful, but she's never here. She's always on base, or in another country. I just needed the authority to help, to pay her bills, to make sure she was safe." She sounded convincing, if you hadn't seen the metadata. Jared stood for the cross-examination. He was calm, almost respectful. "Ms. Monroe, you stated this was all a reaction to your mother's fall. That fall occurred 6 weeks ago, correct?" "Yes, that's right," Haley said. "And you were so concerned you immediately sought to protect her assets?" "Yes, it was an emergency." Jared placed a document on the projector. "This is an associate contract with Blue Ridge Fiduciary, dated 6 months ago. Is this your signature, Ms. Monroe?" Haley's lawyer shot to his feet. "Objection! Relevance!" "It speaks directly to the petitioner's timeline and motive, Your Honor," Jared said, not looking at him. "It proves this was not a reaction to a fall. It was a premeditated plan that predates the alleged incapacity by half a year." "Overruled," Judge Pineda snapped. "The witness will answer." Haley stared at the document, her face white. "Yes, that's my signature." "Thank you. No further questions for this witness at this time," Jared said, sitting down. "Your Honor," Jared said, standing again, "the petitioner's entire case for incapacity rests on one document, a medical evaluation. We would like to address that." He didn't pause. He moved like a surgeon. "We submit Exhibit A, a notarized affidavit from Dr. Calder-Wells, the physician whose name is on that fraudulent report. In it, Dr. Wells swears under oath that he has never met, treated, or evaluated Evelyn Monroe. He further swears his signature is a forgery." Haley's lawyer was on his feet. "Objection! This is hearsay." "It's a sworn affidavit, counsel, submitted with our motion," Jared said. "And," Jared continued, "Dr. Wells confirms his office is, and has always been, Suite 204. The report filed by your client is for Suite 240, a non-existent address." Judge Pineda was glaring at Haley's lawyer. "Do you have a response to this, counsel?" We believe our client was given this information by her partner, Mr. North." "Then let's talk about that," Jared said. "We submit Exhibit B, a printout of the petitioner's own digital log, recovered from her personal device, which explicitly states, quote, G says move to Plan B, heater, timing, and more relevantly, a log from 3 weeks ago. Need to change the suite number, change 204 to 240. It's a clean typo, no one will ever notice." The judge read the printout, her expression hardening. "This evidence is admitted," she said. Jared continued. "The petition also contains numerous documents allegedly co-signed by my client. Ms. Tessa Monroe, we submit Exhibit C, the co-authority medical consent form filed by the petitioner," he put it on the projector, "and next to it, a copy of my client's tax return from 2 years ago." The two signatures were identical, not just similar, identical, down to the last pixel, a clear digital cut and paste. "And finally," Jared said, his voice dropping, "we submit Exhibit D, a handwritten statement from Evelyn Monroe, written 2 days before the police were called, when she first discovered the petitioner's deception." He placed my mother's note on the projector. The shaky, cursive handwriting filled the screen. I, Evelyn Monroe, have not signed any medical or financial power of attorney forms presented to me by Haley Monroe or Graham North. A heavy silence filled the room. I was called to the stand next. Jared kept it short. Officer Monroe, please state your name and occupation for the record. Tessa Monroe. I am a reserve investigator at the Red Cliffs Training Center. When did you first become aware of this petition? Approximately 7 days ago, when I discovered the fraudulent medical documents and internal logs on my sister's phone. And what was your response? I documented the evidence. I verified the fraud with Dr. Wells, and I retained counsel. You did not, as your sister claimed, agree to any of these forms? I did not. I was not aware of them. No further questions. Haley's lawyer stood, looking desperate. Officer Monroe, isn't it true you are, in fact, absent? That you're rarely in Colorado? My service record is not a secret, I said, my voice flat, meeting his gaze. But my physical location does not grant my sister the right to forge my signature and file fraudulent documents with this court. He wilted. No further questions. Your Honor, Jared said, returning to the podium, we have one final piece of evidence. The petitioner's partner, Mr. Graham North, who, we note, has failed to appear, was a key conspirator. He attempted to coerce my client into compliance. Objection, Haley's lawyer yelled. This is outrageous. Is it? Jared asked. We ask the court to play Exhibit E, audio from a meeting between Mr. North and my client, recorded with her consent as a party to the conversation. The judge nodded. Play it. The courtroom was silent, and then Graham's voice filled the air, oily, confident, and deeply menacing. Just authorize Haley. Let her take the lead. Everything will be quiet. Everything will be protected. If you don't, well, it's going to get very, very complicated. For everyone, and especially for you. Think about your security clearance. The clerk pressed stop. The click was like a gunshot. I looked at Haley. Her face was gray. Her eyes were wide, darting from the judge to the door. A trapped animal looking for an escape route. Her lips were pressed so tight they had vanished. She knew. It was all over. Jared addressed the judge. Your Honor, this was never a legitimate petition for guardianship. It was a criminal conspiracy to commit elder abuse, forgery, and extortion. Using this court as a weapon, we ask that this petition be dismissed, with extreme prejudice. We also formally request that this court refer the entire evidence file, including the active police report regarding the Plan B incident, to the district attorney's office for immediate criminal investigation. Judge Pineda took off her glasses. She rubbed the bridge of her nose. Then she looked directly at Haley, and her eyes were flint. Ms. Monroe, the judge said, her voice quiet but lethal. In my 15 years on this bench, I have seen a lot of family disputes, but what I have seen here today is one of the most calculated, brazen, and despicable attempts at fraud I have ever witnessed. She picked up the gavel. The petition for guardianship is dismissed. With extreme prejudice, all rights and authorities of Evelyn Monroe are hereby fully restored. This court voids any and all documents, medical or financial, signed under the petitioner's influence. By authority of this court, Ms. Tessa Monroe is appointed as immediate medical and financial proxy for Evelyn Monroe, to be enacted only if needed. The gavel hit the wood. Crack! And yes, Mr. Wolf, this entire file, including the conduct of Mr. North and the Associate Registry, is to be immediately referred to the district attorney. This court is also ordering a formal investigation into the practices of Blue Ridge Fiduciary and issuing a warrant for their client records, specifically, all files designated military priority. It was done. The entire hearing had taken less than an hour. We stood up. My mother let out a sound that was half sob, half laugh. My grandfather put his hand on my shoulder, his grip firm. Haley sat frozen at her table. Her lawyer was already stuffing papers into his briefcase, avoiding her gaze. He had been paid to file a form. not defend a felony. Finally, Haley stood. Her movements were slow, robotic. She picked up her purse. She walked past the bar, her gaze fixed on the double doors at the back of the courtroom. She passed our row. She didn't look at me. She didn't look at our mother. She just pushed the door open and disappeared into the hallway, walking alone toward the future she had built for herself. My mind snapped back from the cold sterility of the courtroom, back to the hot, pressurized claustrophobia of that first night, back to the study. Graham's panicked whisper was still hanging in the air, vibrating with shock. This was not in the plan. Haley was staring at the certified deed on the table, her face a waxy, bloodless white. My mother was looking at me, her eyes wide with a confusion so profound it was almost childlike. "Tessa, you own the house?" Before I could answer, my grandfather, Arthur Monroe, spoke. He ignored Graham's outburst entirely, as one would ignore a dog barking in the distance. He had not finished. "Mara," he called, his voice carrying easily to the hallway. His housekeeper, Mara, who had been with him for 40 years, appeared in the doorway. She was not a servant. She was his field marshal. She carried herself with an authority that rivaled his own, and her eyes, as they swept the room, were sharp and assessing. She saw me standing. She saw Haley's frozen panic. She saw the papers on the table. And she saw the cheap, imitation leather briefcase Graham had brought. "The other one, Mara, if you would," Arthur said. Mara nodded once, disappeared, and returned a moment later carrying the real briefcase. It was the ancient, worn leather case I had seen him carry my entire life, the one with the brass buckles. This was the one that held the real power. Mara placed it on the table and retreated to the doorway, her arms crossed, a sentinel. Arthur clicked open the buckles. The sound was deafening. He didn't pull out files. He didn't pull out ledgers. He pulled out the heavy vellum envelope I had seen just once before, the one sealed with the disc of dark red wax. "What is this, Grandpa?" Haley's voice was thin, reedy. "More theatrics? You can't just give her the house." "I did not give her the house," Arthur said. He picked up a small, silver letter opener. "I secured it." He slid the blade under the wax, breaking the seal. The sound was a dry crack. "Graham," my grandfather said, not looking up from his task. "You are a director of client transitions at Blue Ridge Fiduciary, are you not?" Graham, who had been scrambling to regain his footing, straightened his tie. "I am, and I can tell you, Mr. Monroe, that this deed, it's highly irregular. We will be contesting it on grounds of—" "On grounds of what?" Arthur asked, sliding a thick, folded document from the envelope. "Lack of capacity? Coercion? This instrument," he held it up, "is an irrevocable trust. It was executed, signed, and filed with the state of Colorado 1 year ago, 6 months before my wife passed away." He let the words land. Haley's mouth opened, then closed. "1 year ago?" my mother whispered. "Yes, Evelyn," Arthur said, his voice softening as he looked at her. "I knew then. I knew what was coming." He turned his gaze to Haley. It was not the gaze of a loving grandfather. It was the gaze of a man who had identified a threat and neutralized it. "You believe you are clever. Haley, you believe your Graham is clever. You think Blue Ridge found you 6 months ago and offered you an opportunity. You are wrong. They targeted you more than 1.5 years ago. They saw your debt. They saw your ambition. They saw your resentment. He knew. He had known everything. I investigated Blue Ridge Fiduciary the moment your client transition emails first appeared in your inbox. I saw their model. I saw the complaints they had settled. They specialize in reallocating the assets of the elderly, often by recruiting a dissatisfied or indebted family member as an associate. You were their entry point. Haley was shaking her head, a desperate, silent no. "So," Arthur continued, "I moved first. I created the Monroe Family Trust. I transferred this house, my property, which was never part of your grandmother's estate, into this trust. It was done to protect you, Evelyn, to protect the estate from the very people you invited into this room." He unfolded the document and laid it flat. "And the sole trustee and beneficiary of this trust, the legal owner of this property, Tessa Monroe." The room was utterly silent. "And the trust," Arthur added, tapping one specific clause with his finger, "contains a residency provision. Any family member residing in the home does so at the discretion of the owner. This privilege is contingent upon respectful and non-detrimental conduct. Any action taken to defraud or harm another resident, or the owner herself, is grounds for immediate, permanent removal." Checkmate. I looked at Haley. This wasn't just a loss. This was an annihilation. She hadn't just lost the house. She had lost the right to even be in it. She finally found her voice. It was not a whisper. It was a shriek. "You bypassed us. You always have. It was always her. You just gave her the one thing you knew I cared about. You favorite." The accusation, so childish and raw, hung in the air. "No, Haley," Arthur said, his voice cold. "I am not playing favorites. I am protecting the family member who did not attempt to sell her mother's future for a commission." Graham North, seeing his entire plan implode, finally found his lawyer's voice. He stood up, jabbing his finger at the trust document. "This is absurd. This is procedural nonsense. A trust of this magnitude? Transferred a year ago? It will be buried in errors. I can guarantee this is not legally binding. We will have this voided by morning on a technicality." My grandfather looked up from the document, his expression almost bored. He took a sip of the ice water Mara had placed at his elbow. "A technicality, Mr. North, such as?" "Improper witnessing, filing errors, lack of a valid notary. I know how these things are done." "Do you?" Arthur said. He glanced at the doorway, where Mara still stood. "Mara, would you be so kind as to ask Ms. Velez if she would like more tea? And perhaps, if she has a moment, to step in here?" Graham's face froze. "Who?" "Ms. Velez," my grandfather said calmly. "The notary public who witnessed my signature, my wife's signature, and filed the trust documentation with the county clerk's office precisely 1 year and 2 months ago. She is a very thorough woman. She's enjoying a cup of Earl Grey in the kitchen." Graham North's mouth opened, and no sound came out. He physically stumbled, catching himself on the back of his chair. He was done. He was completely, utterly, and publicly neutralized. My mother, who had been vibrating with tension, let out a breath she seemed to have been holding for a year. The terror that had lived in her eyes for weeks finally receded. She turned to me, her hand finding mine. Her skin was cold. "Oh, Tessa," she whispered, tears welling. "He told me he had a plan. I didn't understand. I'm so sorry. I didn't see what she was." "It's okay, Mom," I whispered back. "It's over." I stood straight. I was no longer the guest. I was the host. I was the owner, and I was in charge. I looked at the chaos, at my sister, who was vibrating with a silent, murderous rage, at Graham, who was frantically texting on his phone, no doubt to his own lawyer, at my mother, who looked like she was about to collapse. And I looked at the chairs, the 3 chairs they had occupied, and the one they had denied me. "Mr. North," I said, my voice cutting through the silence. "Haley, please, sit down." They both looked at me, stunned. "My grandfather is right," I said. "This is a legal matter, and we should conduct ourselves with respect. There are enough chairs for everyone. Please, take your seats." It was not a request. It was a command. And it was the final humiliation, to be ordered to sit in the very room where they had forced me to the floor. Graham, seeing no other option, slowly sank into his chair. But Haley did not. The order, the loss, the complete inversion of power, it was too much. She snapped. "Sit down?" she hissed, her voice venomous. "You think you can order me to sit down? In my house? It is not your house, Haley, Arthur said. It should be, she screamed. All pretense of the caring daughter burned away, revealing the raw, jealous core beneath. This is what happens. This is what always happens. You fly in here with your uniform and your hero status, and you get everything. You get the praise, you get the respect, and you get the goddamn house. While I stayed, I was here. I did the work. I took care of Mom. I took care of Grandma. I held everything together while you were gone. She was finally telling the truth. If you hadn't left, she spat, her finger jabbing at me. If you weren't always gone, if you were ever here, none of this would have happened. This is your fault. The room was dead silent. She had just confessed. Her motive wasn't care. It wasn't protection. It was spite. It was a furious, burning jealousy that had consumed her. My grandfather looked at her, his face carved from stone. He had heard enough. He lifted his heavy oak cane. He did not point it at Haley. He pointed it at the one empty chair remaining at the table, the guest chair that Graham had occupied. Haley, Arthur Monroe said, his voice final. You have a choice. Right now, you will apologize to your mother for the terror you have put her through. You will apologize to your sister for the conspiracy you built against her, or you will leave my granddaughter's house, immediately. The air in the room was sharp, thin as glass. The chairs were all accounted for. The only thing missing, the only thing that had ever been missing, was the truth, and it had finally taken its seat. The courtroom victory was not an end. It was the starting pistol for the real investigation. Jared Wolfe, energized by the judge's referral, transitioned from my defense attorney to the primary liaison for the district attorney's white-collar crime unit. The warrants the judge had authorized for Blue Ridge Fiduciary and Graham's accounts were executed within hours. The polite, predatory facade of legacy planning was ripped away, exposing the raw machinery of the conspiracy beneath. Jared's team, working with the DA's forensic accountants, found it in less than 48 hours. The shell company. It was called Canyon Harbor LLC, a boring, anonymous name registered in Delaware, with a mailing address at a strip mall in Denver. It was designed to be invisible, a simple pass-through account. Blue Ridge Fiduciary had paid Canyon Harbor over $300,000 in consulting fees over the last year. But Canyon Harbor LLC didn't consult on anything. It had one purpose. Jared called me, his voice tight with a cold fury. We found the artery. Tessa. They were sloppy. Blue Ridge paid the shell, and the shell paid the associates. He sent me the wire transfer statement. It was a single transfer from Canyon Harbor LLC to a private checking account. The recipient, Haley Monroe. The amount? $20,000. The date of the transfer, the exact same day she had filed the emergency guardianship petition with the court. It wasn't a salary, it wasn't a commission, it was a payment for services rendered. It was the mobilization fee for the legal assault on our mother. She wasn't just an associate, Tessa, Jared said. She was the lead contractor on her own family. The warrants on the Blue Ridge servers were even more damning. The DA's cybercrimes unit pulled everything. They found the email chains, the internal directives, and in Graham North's own draft folder, they found the email he had written to the Blue Ridge Legal Counsel, complaining about my presence. The primary beneficiary, E.M., is handled. The secondary, T.M., is proving problematic. She's on grid and asking questions. If we can remove T from the picture, the timeline for asset consolidation will accelerate. Remove T from the picture. The ambiguity was terrifying. Did he mean discredit me, which he had tried to do, or did he mean Plan B? The warrants also gave them the full client list. My family was not an anomaly. We were a data point. Jared saw the pattern immediately. They're targeting our people, Tessa. The list was a directory of the absent and the respected. Dozens of clients. 90% of them were active-duty military, reservists, traveling surgeons, or airline pilots, people with solid assets, good insurance policies, and verifiable, long-term absences, people whose families would be vulnerable, people who, if they flew home, would look unstable and erratic for interfering with the care that Blue Ridge and their co-conspirators had so meticulously arranged. While Jared handled the money, I went to see Miguel. He had been working on the encrypted data clone, digging deeper than the Bennett logs. The police had the phone, but Miguel had the original clone, the one he'd taken before Haley knew she was caught. They were running forensics on the active phone, Miguel said, his face grim as he turned his monitor toward me. They were looking at what she wrote. I was looking at what she deleted. He had run a deep recovery protocol, and he had found the rest of Plan B. The note I'd found, heater, timing, leave before 11, was just the title. The file cluster he recovered was the full operational plan. My stomach turned to ice. He had recovered 4 deleted image files. They were grainy cell phone pictures of my mother's propane heater, taken from different angles, highlighting the valve and the ignition switch. He had recovered a hand-drawn map, a crude schematic of the garage, with arrows pointing to the workbench, the heater's location, and the side door. The side door was labeled, "Sticks, Jam from outside." And he had recovered the deleted text file, a timeline. 7 p.m., arrive EM, house, bring Thai food, mom's favorite. 8 o'clock p.m., move conversation to garage, pre-lit vanilla candles to mask odor. 8:15 p.m., activate heater, confirm propane valve open. 9 o'clock p.m., confirm side door is jammed shut, wedge if necessary. 10:45 p.m., depart, leave all phones at home, no location ping. 11 p.m., call 911 from burner, report welfare check on EM, anonymous. This was not a vague, angry idea. This was a detailed, premeditated plot to commit murder. Disguised as an accident, timed to the minute, they had planned to jam the door, turn on the gas, and leave my mother to die. Also, they could call it in anonymously and rush in later as the grieving, concerned family members. I printed a copy. I gave it to Jared. Jared gave it to the DA. The charge sheets were amended. This was no longer just fraud. It was attempted murder. My mother, finally seeing the full, horrific picture in black and white, went numb. Then she got angry. She met Jared at his office, with me and my grandfather present, and she systematically dismantled every tool Haley had ever tried to use. She signed a new, ironclad, defensive power of attorney, naming me as her primary and Jared's firm as the secondary. It explicitly revoked any and all previous documents, real or imagined. Every fraudulent paper Haley had filed was rendered legally void. My grandfather, meanwhile, made his final move. He did not celebrate. He built a fortress. He established a new, separate, and massively funded trust. The Evelyn Monroe Care Trust. It had nothing to do with the house. It was endowed with enough capital to pay for my mother's living expenses, medical care, and travel for the rest of her life, completely independent of the estate. He made me the sole monitor. Full transparency, Arthur said, handing me the login. Every statement is open, every dollar is accounted for. It is the exact opposite of what they did. This family will have no more secrets. The blowback was immediate. The Raven Ridge Gazette got wind of the court hearing. A reporter called my mother, prominent local family in guardianship battle, Blue Ridge fiduciary under criminal investigation. Jared's command was absolute. You say nothing, not one word to anyone. We are not trying this in the press. We are handing the district attorney a perfect, sealed, uncontaminated case. You talk. You risk the conviction. Strategic silence. Tessa, let the evidence do the work. Blue Ridge fiduciary, however, could not stay silent. Their stock was taking a hit. They went into full damage control. Their PR firm released a statement. Blue Ridge fiduciary was appalled to learn of the unauthorized, rogue actions of a single employee, Mr. Graham North. Mr. North's employment has been terminated, effective immediately. We are cooperating fully with authorities. They were throwing him under the bus. They were painting him as a lone wolf, a bad apple who had conned their client, Haley Monroe. Jared laughed when he read it. "A rogue employee," he said. He picked up his phone and forwarded one single email to the DA, the one he'd pulled from the server. Subject: New associate login. To Graham North. From Blue Ridge HR. Body: Graham. Per your request. We have provisioned an associate-level login for Haley Monroe. Haley, BlueRidgeFidea.com, with access to the client intake portal. Please welcome her to the team. She wasn't a client. She wasn't a victim. She was a new hire. The DA moved. A temporary asset freeze was placed on Canyon Harbor LLC, Graham North's personal accounts, and any account Haley held, pending the criminal investigation. Graham, facing charges of conspiracy, fraud, and attempted murder, was subpoenaed. And then, the final piece, the squeeze. The district attorney's office sent Haley's lawyer a proffer letter. It was a formal offer. Testify truthfully and completely against Graham North and the internal practices of Blue Ridge Fiduciary. Turn over all your devices. In exchange, the DA would consider her cooperation when recommending a sentence. She had a choice: fall with them or try to save herself by burying them. We heard nothing for 2 days. The silence was absolute. I expected her to violate the restraining order, to show up at my apartment or my grandfather's house, screaming. She didn't. On the 3rd day, Jared's office received a call. It was from Haley's new criminal defense attorney. "My client refuses to speak to the DA," her lawyer said, "but she is willing to speak. She wants to meet with Tessa." Jared called me immediately. "It's a trap. Tessa, she's going to plead. She's going to cry. She's going to try to get you to say something sympathetic that her lawyer can use to claim duress. Do not go." "She's not calling the DA," I said, looking out my window. "She's not calling Graham. She's calling me." I thought about the heater. I thought about the forged signature. I thought about her, sitting alone at the courthouse table, the only one of her team to show up. "I'll meet her," I said. "Tessa, I am advising you as your counsel." "I'll meet her," I repeated, "but not on her terms, on mine." The meeting was set for the next afternoon. Not at a coffee shop, not at a law office. I chose the Raven Ridge Police Station, the neutral ground where all of this had become real. I walked in. Jared was at my side. We were led to a small, gray Famond services room. It was stark, furnished with a metal table and 4 chairs. Haley was already there. She sat next to her lawyer. She looked evaporated. All the polish, the anger, the sharp, brittle energy was gone. She was just a woman in a gray sweatshirt, staring at the table. Jared placed his briefcase on the table and took out a small professional digital recorder. He pressed the button. The small red light blinked on. "This meeting is being recorded," he announced. I sat down opposite my sister. "You wanted to talk," I said. "I'm here." The small gray room smelled of stale coffee and disinfectant. The red light on Jared's recorder was a single, unblinking eye, watching us. Haley wouldn't look at me. She stared at the metal table, at her own hands, which she was twisting in her lap. Her lawyer, a tired-looking public defender who had clearly drawn the short straw, cleared his throat. "My client is here voluntarily," he began, his voice a monotone. "She wishes to make a statement to you, Ms. Monroe, in hopes of clarifying the situation." Jared just tapped the recorder. "It's on the record. Proceed, Ms. Monroe." Haley flinched. She swallowed, her throat clicking. When she finally spoke, her voice was a dry rasp, all its polished, confident edges gone. Graham, he told me it was standard," she whispered. He said the firm had a program for families with absent assets. That's what he called you, an absent asset." She finally looked up, her eyes red-rimmed and desperate. At first, I believed him. I did. He showed me projections, debts. She reached into her bag and pulled out a folded piece of notebook paper. It was a handwritten letter. She pushed it across the table. Her hand was shaking so badly it looked like a separate entity. "My lawyer told me not to write this," she whispered. "But I had to." I didn't pick it up. I read it from where I sat. It was her confession, written in the looping cursive I remembered from birthday cards. It was all there. The initial meeting with Graham at a wealth seminar, her own suffocating personal debts, something she had hidden from all of us, Graham's promise that she wasn't just helping her mother. She was earning her rightful share of a legacy she had managed while I was gone. Then came the real motive, the lines that burned on the page. "You don't know what it was like. Tess, you were always the one they were proud of. The uniform, the clearances, the important job. You were chosen. When Grandpa gave you the house, it was the last time. It was the proof. He always chose you. I just wanted what I had earned. I just wanted what was supposed to be mine." I finished reading. I looked back up at her. The air was thick with her expectation. She was waiting for the explosion, for the lecture, the tears, the "how could you?" I gave her none of it. I leaned forward, my voice quiet, cutting through her manufactured grief. "I've read your why, Haley. Now tell me the how. That name you signed, my name, the one you cut and pasted onto the medical consent. Did you sign that because you were afraid of Graham? Or did you sign it because you thought it was right?" The question hung in the air. It was the scalpel. It bypassed the tears and the jealousy and went straight to the cold, hard fact of her own choice. She had no answer. The why didn't matter. She had held the mouse. She had clicked paste. She broke. A raw, ugly sob tore out of her. He said it was the only way. I didn't know about the heater. Tess, I swear I didn't. That was him. That was all him. He said it was just a contingency." "A contingency for what, Haley?" I asked, my voice like ice. "For my mother not dying fast enough?" "Tessa, please," she begged, her composure shattering. If you can just forgive me, please, tell the DA to stop. You're the one they listen to. You're the victim. You can stop this. Please, Tess, I'm your sister." There it was, the final, desperate manipulation. I looked at her, and for the first time, I felt nothing. Not anger, not pity, just an absolute, cold absence. "My forgiveness doesn't change the police report. Haley," I said, my voice flat. "It doesn't make Dr. Wells's affidavit disappear. It doesn't unplug the heater. And it doesn't undelete the Plan B timeline you saved on your phone. You are not the victim here. You were a conspirator. You have to take responsibility." Her face crumpled. She understood. There was no emotional exit. Her lawyer, seeing his client's last attempt fail, sighed and shifted into his real purpose for being there. "My client," he said, pushing his glasses up, she is prepared to cooperate, fully." Jared, who had been silent, opened his briefcase. He slid a single, thick document across the table, the DA's proffer letter. "That's the deal," Jared said. "It's not a negotiation. You will detail, under oath, every single interaction you had with Graham North. You will describe the internal structure of Blue Ridge Fiduciary. You will turn over every device, every email, every password. You will consent to a full, voluntary forensic audit of all your accounts, and you will agree to a permanent financial restraining order, barring you from any and all contact with your mother's assets." It was total surrender. Haley looked at her lawyer, who just nodded. It was the only move she had left. She picked up the pen. Her hand was still shaking, but she signed her name. Then, her lawyer slid a second, much thinner folder toward Jared. "In the spirit of that cooperation," her lawyer said, "my client. She kept her own records. She didn't trust Mr. North. She believes he was running his own operations, separate from Blue Ridge." He opened it. It was a list, a simple typed list of 6 names, with account numbers and dates. "These are other families," her lawyer said. "Other clients, all military, all priority cases. These are the ones Graham was planning to accelerate after he had secured your mother's estate. He was building his own portfolio. She was supposed to be the first. Jared looked at the list. His eyes widened. He knew one of the names, a colonel from Peterson Air Force Base whose elderly mother had been in the news. Haley had just handed the DA the keys to the entire kingdom. It wasn't just a confession. It was the Rosetta Stone for Graham's entire criminal enterprise. As we stood to leave, Jared's phone buzzed. He looked at the screen, and a slow, thin smile spread across his face. He put the phone to his ear. "Wolf?" He listened. "Understood. Thank you, Detective." He hung up and looked at me. The DA didn't wait. The second Haley's lawyer called to accept the proffer. They moved. They just arrested Graham North at the Denver International Airport. He paused, letting me absorb it. He was at the gate for a one-way flight to Zurich. His carry-on bag contained his laptop, 3 encrypted hard drives, and a manila envelope filled with 20 blank, notarized power of attorney forms. Haley had saved herself, and in doing so, she had given them the exact evidence they needed to bury him. That night, my grandfather called. I was at the house, my house. The silence felt different now. It wasn't tense. It was just empty. "The tide always goes out, Tessa," Arthur said, his voice frail on the line. "It makes a terrible noise, and it rips up the beach, but it always goes out. What matters is how you stand once the water is gone." "I'm standing, Grandpa," I said. "I know you are." Life began to find a new rhythm, a quiet, hesitant, fragile rhythm. My mother, after weeks of sitting in stunned silence, started to move again. I came home one afternoon and found her at the dining room table. It wasn't covered in fraudulent legal documents. It was covered in newspaper, tubes of paint, and a small canvas board. She was painting. It was a clumsy, amateurish, but vibrant painting of the mountains. "It's a class," she said, not looking up, a faint flush on her cheeks. "At the community center, for landscapes. I think I'm terrible at it, but I'm going back on Tuesday." It was the first time I had heard her talk about the future in months. I set about reclaiming the house. I was the owner, and I would be the protector. I called Miguel. He came over, not with encrypted drives, but with a toolbox. "This is different," I told him. "I'm not gathering evidence anymore. I'm building a fortress, and this time, everything is legal." We changed every lock, replacing them with commercial-grade, pick-proof deadbolts. He installed a new, state-of-the-art security system. But the cameras were not pinholes in my shirt. They were visible, documented, and pointed outward. One on the porch, one on the driveway, one on the garage, a smart doorbell. We were establishing a perimeter. The violations were over. That night, my mother and I ate dinner at the dining room table. For the first time, it felt like our own. There were only 3 chairs. One for me, one for her, and one for my grandfather, who had driven over. The head chair, the one my father used to sit in, sat empty. My mother looked at it, then at me. I stood up, I walked to the chair, pulled it out, and gestured for her to sit. "Mom," I said, "this is your chair. It has always been your chair." She hesitated, then slowly, she sat down. She looked at me, her eyes finally clear of the fog. I sat in the chair next to her. I was no longer the guest on the floor. I was her daughter, sitting at her side. A week later, the final envelope arrived. It was not a threat. It was not a summons. It was a formal notification from the district attorney's office. It was the decision. They were moving forward with a full prosecution. The list of defendants was long. The State of Colorado versus Blue Ridge Fiduciary, LLC, et al. And at the very top of the list, designated as the primary ringleader, was the name Graham North. Haley's name was absent. She was now a witness for the prosecution. The war was over. The cleanup had begun. The federal hearing was a different beast. This wasn't a small, beige probate court. It was a cavernous, wood-paneled room that smelled of old books and institutional power. The lawyers for Blue Ridge Fiduciary were not anxious public defenders. They were a team of 5, sharks in $2,000 suits. Their defense was exactly what Jared had predicted: deflection. They were appalled by the deeply unethical rogue actions of Mr. Graham North. He was a lone wolf. They claimed Haley Monroe was not their agent. She was a disturbed local contractor who had been manipulated by North, acting outside the scope of her agreement. Blue Ridge, they argued, was a victim of reputational damage caused by 2 greedy, unstable individuals. Jared stood up. He was not intimidated. He seemed to feed on their arrogance. "Your Honor," he said, his voice quiet but carrying to every corner of the room. "The defense's claim that this was the work of individuals is a falsehood. We are here to prove that this was not a rogue action. It was the corporate business model." He began, and it was beautiful. It was not a speech. It was a dissection. On the large screens, he projected the flow chart from the forensic accountants. "This," he said, "is Canyon Harbor, LLC, the shell corporation, and this is the money. We see a payment from Blue Ridge to Canyon Harbor for consulting, and we see a simultaneous payment from Canyon Harbor to Haley Monroe for $20,000 on the exact day she filed the fraudulent guardianship petition against her own mother." He clicked to the next slide. "This," he said, "is the Blue Ridge internal server, and this is the email from Blue Ridge HR to Graham North, provisioning an associate-level login. Haley, Blue Ridge Fid.com. She was not a contractor. She was an agent. She was given the keys." He clicked again. "And this," he said, "is the audio of Mr. North, the rogue agent, threatening my client, a reserve officer, with the loss of her security clearance, a tactic he used only after she began to investigate the Blue Ridge model." Jared turned to the judge. "This is not a bad apple. This is the system, the money, the tools, the intent. This is how Blue Ridge Fiduciary operates. They identify vulnerable families. They recruit an indebted relative, and they use the court system as a weapon to seize assets. Graham North was not a rogue agent. He was their best agent." The Blue Ridge lawyers scrambled. They pivoted. Their last desperate move was to attack the foundation. They began to question the entire narrative, suggesting the real undue influence was from my grandfather, Arthur Monroe. "We have reason to believe," the lead lawyer said, "that the asset transfer of the house, which seems to have triggered this entire unfortunate family dispute, was itself suspect. We question the capacity of Mr. Arthur Monroe." Jared smiled. He actually smiled. "Your Honor, the prosecution would like to call a final rebuttal witness, Ms. Carmen Velez." Ms. Velez, the notary, walked in. She was the woman from my grandfather's kitchen, and she was the picture of professional integrity. She took the stand. Jared was brief. "Ms. Velez, you are a notary public, bonded by the state of Colorado?" "I am, for 22 years. "Did you, 1 year and 2 months ago, notarize the transfer of the Monroe family home into an irrevocable trust?" "I did." "The defense has questioned the capacity of the grantor. Mr. Arthur Monroe, in your professional opinion, what was his state of mind?" The Blue Ridge lawyer shot up. "Objection. The witness is a notary, not a doctor." "She is an expert witness on the fitness of a signer, Your Honor," Jared countered. "Overruled. The witness may answer," the judge said. "Ms." Velez looked at the defense table, her expression bordering on contempt. "Mr. Arthur Monroe was one of the sharpest, most precise clients I have ever served. He was not confused. He was focused. He explained the entire trust document to me, from memory. He stated his purpose explicitly. 'I am protecting my family,' he said, 'from predatory financial firms and from my granddaughter Haley's catastrophic judgment.' His capacity was perfect. His signature was firm." It was over. The click of her briefcase closing was the final nail. The district attorney stood. He did not summarize. He simply added the final weight. "Your Honor, as a result of Ms. Haley Monroe's full cooperation, The state has been able to open active investigations into 6 other cases of advanced fraud, all linked to Mr. North and the Blue Ridge military priority files. Her testimony has been instrumental in protecting those 6 families from the fate that almost befell this one. The court should note her cooperation. The verdicts came down like an avalanche. Graham North, seeing the evidence against him, had taken the plea. He was found guilty on all counts of fraud, conspiracy, and extortion. His attempted murder charge, supported by the Plan B evidence, was folded into the deal. He was sentenced to 20 years in federal prison. I watched them lead him away. No sharp suit, no cologne, just a man in a rumpled shirt, his shoulders slumped. Blue Ridge fiduciary was suspended. The judge ordered their activities frozen, their assets seized pending a class action civil trial that Jared was already drafting, and their operating license revoked in the state of Colorado. Then it was Haley's turn. She stood alone before the judge. She was a ghost. "Ms. Monroe," the judge said, her voice echoing in the quiet room, "your actions were monstrous. You weaponized your family's trust. You very nearly cost your mother her life and her freedom. The only reason you are not joining Mr. North is that you chose, in the end, to undo the damage you helped create. Your cooperation saved others." The sentence was delivered. 3 years, suspended, 500 hours of community service, and most importantly, a mandatory 5-year ban from working in any capacity in the financial services industry. Her career was over. Finally, the judge ordered her into mandatory, court-supervised debt and behavioral therapy. She was not just being punished. She was being forced to fix the broken part of herself that had started it all. That night, we gathered, not for a party, but for a recovery. We were at the house, my house. My mother was in the kitchen, actually humming. My grandfather was by the fire. I had set the dining room table. When I walked in, I saw my grandfather struggling, carrying 2 folding chairs from the garage. "What are those for?" I asked. "Guests," he said, huffing. "We have guests. Evelyn invited Mara and Ms. Velez, and Jared." I looked at the table. We had the 6 chairs from the dining set, and now, 2 folding chairs at the end. There were extra chairs. There were more than enough. No one would be left standing. No one would be relegated to the floor. During the quiet dinner, my grandfather stood, raising his glass of water. "There is an old saying," he said, his voice frail but steady, and silencing the room. "Assets protect the house. Dignity protects the people." He looked at my mother, then at me. "Today," he said, "we have both. To family." "To family," we all echoed. After, I sat with my mother on the sofa. I handed her a thick 3-ring binder. It was blue. "What's this?" she asked. "This is the new system," I said. "This is the transparency binder. In it, you will find the contact information for my lawyer and for your new, independent lawyer. You will find the login for the trust my grandfather set up for you. You will find a schedule for our quarterly reviews. You will find the password, which we will change every 90 days. No more hidden papers. Mom, no more secret files. From now on, everything is open." She opened it. She ran her fingers over the clean, typed pages. She didn't cry from fear. She cried from relief. As she was looking through it, there was a quiet knock at the front door. I went to answer it. It was Haley. She was alone. She was not crying. She was not hysterical. She just looked empty. She looked past me, at our mother on the sofa, then back at me. "I'm here to say what I have to say," she said, her voice flat. "I am sorry for the fraud, for the fear." She took a breath. "I was wrong. 3 sentences, no excuses. No, but you were never here. No, Graham made me. Just the truth." I had prepared for this moment. I had prepared for rage, for a plea, for a defense. I had not prepared for this. I looked at her. The sister I had known was gone, replaced by this stranger, this felon, but she had done what the court ordered. She had started the work. I didn't hug her. I didn't say it was okay. I just nodded. Once. We heard you, I said. It was acceptance, not absolution. It was the end. She turned, walked down the steps, and disappeared into the night. I closed the door. I locked the new, heavy deadbolt. The click was solid, final. The house was quiet. My mother had gone to bed, clutching the binder. My grandfather was asleep in the guest room. I was alone, walking down the central hallway. My hand drifted along the wall, my fingers finding a familiar groove in the plaster, a long, horizontal scratch, about waist-high. It had been there since I was 9, from when I'd tried to drag my bicycle inside during a hailstorm. It was a flaw. It was part of the history. It was real. I reached the front door. I flipped the switch for the porch light. A warm yellow glow flooded the front room, chasing the shadows from the corners, falling across the empty chairs, the clean table. It was not the harsh, accusatory red and blue of police lights. It was a beacon. It was safety. I stood there, looking out at the quiet street. They once left me on the floor. Now the house is in my name, and I am standing on my own 2 feet. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I would love to know where in the world you are listening from. So please comment below and let's connect. Share your thoughts on what happened, and if you have a story of your own, please subscribe to Lila Revenge Stories, like this video, and give us a little extra support by hitting that hype button to help this story be heard by more people.